What is the biggest mistake you've ever made? I betrayed my husband. 3 months ago, I was out on a business trip for 3 days. The first night, I went out for drinks with my coworkers. While out, a man started flirting with me. I guess at the time I liked the attention. My husband had always been loving and supportive. He's handsome, in incredible shape, and he constantly compliments me, so I don't know why I felt so gratified by this random guy, but I did. After way too many drinks, I went with him to his apartment and we did the deed. Immediately afterwards, I realized what I had done and left. I cut my work trip short, saying I felt ill and headed home. I immediately confessed to my husband. I told him everything, and offered to answer all his questions. He just said he needed to go for a walk, and when he came back, he just asked me if I liked it. I was honest with him. I told him I didn't. It wasn't fun, it was fodder intimacy with a man that clearly didn't care if I enjoyed it or not. This guy was nowhere near as good as my husband was, and I told him this. He just stood there looking at me, and told me he needed to go out for a bit to think and left again. He was gone for a couple of hours and finally stumbled back through the front door really inebriated. It was I can barely speak kinda drunk. That became a common occurrence since the incident. He's gone from drinking maybe 3 times a month at the most, to drinking every night. And it's not just drinking, but getting blackout drunk and passing out either in our backyard or on the couch. He started smoking cigarettes again, even after he quit 2 years ago. He's been blowing off our friends when they invite him out to events. He just goes to work, comes home, drinks and smokes, then passes out. He hasn't gone to the gym since I told him my secret. He used to go 5 times a week. He barely eats anything. Whenever I try to talk to him, he just responds with short answers or mumbles. When we had our first marriage counseling sessions, he barely spoke. The counselor tried to get something out of him, but he just gave the same short answers. I've offered everything I can think of to make things right. I've been doing the things he always did for me. I made him coffee each morning, told him he's handsome, and offered to do errands for him. But he didn't seem to care anymore. He was just a shell of his former self. I'm really scared I've done something irreparable. I haven't seen him smile this entire time. 2 months ago, he came back from whatever pub he had been drinking at with a bloody nose and a black eye. I was horrified and tried to find out what happened. He just told me to screw off. He started telling me I might as well go find that guy I cheated with so I can be happy. I tried telling him I've always been happy with him, but he threw it back in my face asking why I cheated. I didn't have an answer. I've spent these months racking my brain but I can't think of a single reason why I did it. He wasn't better looking, nicer, in better shape, more attentive or anything. It was just a mistake I made after having too much to drink. I don't know what to do. It feels like there's nothing left in this marriage. In a last-ditch effort, I told his best friend what had happened. I asked her to come over 2 nights ago, so that I could explain the situation. She, rightfully, exploded in my face, calling me horrible names and asked when my husband was. I told her he was at the pub, and she stormed out without saying another word. They came back home 20 minutes later, and she told me to pack some bags because I needed to stay with my parents. I tried to argue, but my husband told me to leave. I told my parents as well. They were confused as to why I was showing up at their house at 8 p.m. with 3 bags full of clothes. I told them I just needed a place to stay, and they didn't question it. I sent my husband a text that night saying I loved him, and that I would do anything to get his trust back. Last month, I called his best friend to see if she's made any progress with his drinking. She told me he started attending AA meetings, and has since dumped all of the alcohol in the house down the drain. This whole time, she's been staying with him to ensure he doesn't hurt himself. At some point, my parents found out about what I had done, and they were furious. My father refuses to speak with me, and my mother won't even look me in the eye. A huge gap has formed between my parents and I, and it seems like everything is hopeless. Every time my phone vibrates, I have a small panic attack. I'm terrified I'll get a message from him telling me he's done with me and never wants to speak to me again. I know I probably deserve him divorcing me, but I'll do anything to make this work. I just can't stop thinking about that night. My husband is the most incredibly handsome and kind man I've ever met, and yet I tossed him to the side to have some mediocre fun time with a sleazebag who I'll never see again. Even my sister has decided she doesn't want to see me for a while. She said she can't trust me around her husband. I'm sure all of his friends know what happened, because all of them have me blocked on social media now. I deserve this and so much more. I know I shouldn't have, but I saw my husband today. Word has spread around my office about what I had done. I kept getting looks from my coworkers and I couldn't take it anymore, so I quit my job. My first day off was today, and I've spent most of it crying. I couldn't take it anymore, so I drove to our house to speak to him. I know I promised him space, but it was like someone was sitting on my chest. I was hoping we could talk. Part of me was also hoping he would be at work and I wouldn't see him, because I know he doesn't want to see me. When I walked in the door, he was standing there, looking at me with an emotionless expression on his face. I told him I wanted to hear his voice, and was just looking to talk. Without thinking, he told me to go back to my parents' place. He sounded so fed up with me. I tried telling him how I was feeling, but he just said he needs time to think about everything. His best friend was there and she started yelling at me, telling me to go. I tried saying I just wanted to speak to my husband, and she laughed, telling me I might as well start calling him my ex. He stopped her, which I appreciated, and asked her to give us some time to talk. She was clearly reluctant but did walk out of the room. I asked him if he was going to go to marriage counseling this week and he said no. He told me he doesn't know if we'll be able to make it past this, since he doesn't see me as his wife anymore. I told him I wouldn't fight it if he wanted a divorce, but if he was willing to give me a chance, I'd do anything to earn back his trust. I told him I'd quit my job and I'd find one that meant I could work from home. I wouldn't take a trip anywhere unless he came with me. I'd only drink around him and only drink if he did. I'd give him access to my phone and social media, and he'd have my location at all times. He just looked at me and said he isn't a prison guard and has no intention of becoming one. I tried telling him it isn't about being a prison guard. It's about showing him I'm serious, about earning back his trust. He looked down and told me that it was highly unlikely. He asked me if I've ever cheated before and I promised him I haven't. He asked me to explain what happened that night, all the details. I didn't want to, but I did. He just looked at me the whole time, silently listening. I didn't spare anything. I told him everything. So that's all it took for you to destroy our marriage? Some guy offering to buy you drinks and complimenting you is all it took? He asked. I was a mess at this point. I told him I was wrong and selfish. I had done something unforgivable, but I was determined to show him how much I love him. He just looked down and said, "It's clear you never truly loved me. You love yourself, and you loved what I could give you, but you never loved me. If you truly loved me, you wouldn't have cheated. Even just the thought of sleeping with you makes me nauseous." He told me he didn't need to hear any more, and me showing up to speak to him was proof I didn't care about his needs. He said he was going to find a divorce lawyer in the next 2 weeks and start the process. It felt like a knife in my back. I begged him to wait until we had finished our counseling, and while he agreed that I should go through with it, he said our marriage was over. He told me he'd be willing to split our money down the middle, and sell the house so we could start our own again. But once the divorce was done, he didn't want anything to do with me. He'd seen my true colors, and he hated them. He told me to grab anything I needed from the house, and that the next time he'd speak to me would be with whoever he hires to be his divorce lawyer. I hate myself. I've ruined my marriage not even 5 years into it. I've been struggling to sleep longer than 3 hours, and when I do I have these awful nightmares that make me feel empty. My counseling session is in a couple of days, but I'm not doing well at all. I can't really talk to anyone either, because all of my close friends have been supporting my husband now that they know about my infidelity. My sister won't talk to me or return any of my messages. My dad is seeming to do everything he can to avoid me. And Mai is giving me the silent treatment. My whole life has collapsed around me. I understand that I don't deserve to be coddled, but I can't even speak to my parents about how I'm doing. I've barely been able to eat, I have no appetite, and most of what I do now is cry in my room about my mom and dad's house. I hate that. I feel dirty. I keep showering, but the feeling doesn't go away. I just want to be with my husband. I know I have no right to feel like this, but I find myself daydreaming about being with him again like that, even if just to make that my last intimate experience. I don't know where to proceed from here. Do I really just have to come to terms with the fact that my husband hates my guts?